You're listening to the Academy Podcast, presenting an innovative curriculum for personal growth. Sit in on exclusive conversations with influential people as they share the secrets that made them the front runners in their industries. Now, here are your hosts, Austin and Kagia.
My name is Kagia Scott, and you can call me G.
My name is Austin, and you can call me Austin. And welcome to the Academy Podcast. Thank you so much for all of those who are watching us on YouTube or Facebook, those who listen to us on our podcast for Spotify and Apple. We're just glad to have you guys on for another powerful episode. G, man, how you feeling today?
Man, I'm feeling good. Just quickly, man, just want to talk real quick about, man, what's going on in the community. Something that's kind of been on all of our minds lately is my man who was just going for a jog. And we know these things happen, but they don't always get news coverage. But this one has. So I just want to bring up the fact that, you know, I'm a marathon runner, former marathon runner.
Right.
And I've been running through neighborhoods. My children may be running through neighborhoods. And to think that, you know, we're in danger getting exercise because somebody can misconstrue that as doing something we shouldn't be doing and feel like they could just kill us.
Right.
It's just another reminder that we are not where we want to be as a nation.
Yeah, and I think what happened to Ahmaud Arbery, man, is tragic. And I think that just for somebody who was just exercising, getting out there and jogging speaks to the larger injustice of what's really happening. And so this happened, right now we're experiencing it live right here, but it's happened months ago. And so it's just getting the coverage because of what's happened with the video. And I'm not gonna lie, man, I have not seen the video. I don't plan to watch it. I'm not one of those guys, man, but I do, my heart does go out. But I think it speaks to a larger context that, it appears that a lot of people still feel that the black man, the black African American, the black woman, even our children are still not safe in the land of the free. And it's not really the land of the free, to be honest, man. We struggle every single day, not just with our culture when it comes to poverty, but also with the injustice of what happens in our streets to the injustice of our prison system. So that's a big part of it, man. And
so, and just in line with that, Doc, we have a guest today who, and you'll hear the story, who spent, year upon year upon year, man, locked up unjustly,
right?
Just trumped up, and we get an opportunity to kind of get it, find out what happened, and kind of talk about it. And so I'm glad, man, that he agreed to come on here with me. I'm glad my man Johnathan Moore, my classmate, Pine Forge Academy class of '90, joins us in here, and the world needs to hear his story, Doc.
Yeah,
needs to know.
For sure.
And I think we'll all benefit from this interview, man. So, John, man, appreciate you having me, man.
Yeah, thanks for being on, man. Appreciate it, man.
It's good to be here, man. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, first, before he gets into the first question, let me ask you, how you feeling today, man? You got a nice scenery, man. You look good. For those who are listening, he's got an amazing view behind him. Tell us, man, how you feeling today?
It's a beautiful day. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, and the sun is shining bright. God has been good to me. And I'm just taking this time during the pandemic to draw closer to him and just enjoy the day.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff. Good stuff.
Hey, man, I appreciate that background, man. I think you have an appreciation for the beauty, man, that is behind and around you, man. And so I'm grateful, man, to be able to see you there. So you heard what we were kind of talking about, man. We want to kind of talk about your process. There's a lot of questions that we have about, the before, during, and the after your prison term, man. But just if you can paint a short picture for us of kind of the situation that got you so many years locked up.
Well, to give you the concise version, picture me at 18 years old. I'm in college. Just graduated from boarding school, promising student, at one point a B student in college, but I have this desire to be a rap artist. And I see this in a lot of young men today, wanting the fame, the fortune, etc. And so in spite of being in college, I wanted to pursue a career in rap. And so I went to Atlanta and I saw a person that I knew from my childhood who I had not seen in about 5 years, because I went to Pine Forge about 4 years. And, I hadn't seen him about 2 years in New York. And so it was that I saw him at this nightclub. And so I'm at the nightclub, and to see someone that you knew from your hometown, from New York, and I was in the South in Atlanta, to see someone from your childhood, there's an affinity that you build there. So basically, I found out that he liked rap music, which I was definitely trying to pursue. And we put our influences together. He was working at a place and knew Dominique Wilkins was a regular at that place, and Bobby Brown. And so me having the desire to rap, we put our resources together and formed a group called Into This. ENTADIS.
Did you just say Bobby Brown? Did he just name
Bobby Brown? Yeah.
Come on, man. So he dropped down with it. That's dope, man.
So now I'm giving my age away. So, but
together,
so
bro.
The desire was that he had the connections, right, and he also rapped. So we were going to come together and we were going to make our dreams come to fruition. But whenever you're in pursuit of something that's not in line with your destiny, there's always the situational thing in which you find yourself in that gray area of life. Wow. Because the power of God is not present. He's present, but he's not fueling your ambition, basically. And so we got together and we performed at a fraternal gathering called Freaknik. And the name says everything about it. For those of you who don't know what it was Freaknik. It was a picnic that should never have happened. And so we got a chance to perform, and we did well. We performed at a major club there, and there were some A&R representatives there, and they liked our group and wanted to sign us for a major record deal. And so upon going to this meeting, or talk of this meeting, I should say, one of the members of my group had DUI fines. And I don't know if you know, but back then, because computers were not as savvy as they are now, you could actually have gotten a DUI in one state and another state not really know about it. And so when they did an extensive background check before signing us, they found out about the things that were attached to him in terms of his legal past.
Wow.
And the dilemma of my life starts here, because the story is very extensive, but I want to kind of bring it to centralize it. We want to sign to this record label, so that means that his DUI fines have to be paid. And so he introduced me to a friend of his, and this friend agreed to pay off the fine, but he needed a ride to go get money from someone who owed him money personally. And upon that, he was going to pay off the fine for the guy that was in my group. And it just seems like we should have just signed, and maybe life would have been different. However, again, when you are outside of the sphere of your purpose and destiny, then you face the storms of life.
Yeah.
And so basically, I take him to an apartment complex of a guy that he said owed him some money. When he gets there, he gets out of my car. I'm the driver. There's the guy who has the fines. He's in the back seat. There's a guy who had nothing to do with the fines, was just a close friend that's in the car. And there's the actual person that's supposed to be getting the money. He gets out of the car and he goes to his apartment complex, and he comes back and says, well, the guy's not at home. So I'm like, all right, well, maybe we go back, another day. But he says, hold up a minute. And I want to pause right here for a second. 1 minute of your life, one bad decision can cost you so many years and so much frustration in your life.
Wow.
And in that 1 minute's time, he went away from my car, and I was thinking he was perhaps going somewhere where he knew he would hang out, or maybe he saw his car. And he went around to the side of a parking lot out of my plain view, and he tried to rob an innocent man. And in the course of that, According to testimony that was given, there was an altercation between him and the man verbally. And it is said that he said that it looked like the man was reaching for something, and he had a gun and he shot the person that was in the car. When he came back to the car, the first thing that was on my mind was not so much fear in the aspect of fear of something that was happening, because I've heard gunshots before. But when I heard the shot, it didn't really sound like it sounded more like a backfiring of a car. I could recognize it, and I thought maybe it might be a shot, but I wasn't so much certain. But the fact that he ran to the car and was frantic and was like, let's go, now I knew what actually happened.
Right.
And so there wasn't a whole lot of talk, but he did go into detail about some of the things that he did and why he did it. And I kind of cut that off because at that point I realized that I'm in some serious trouble. And I remember vividly driving down this parkway and my entire life just flashing before me. Like, how did I go from, enjoying my life, enjoying my college time, to being involved in this situation? And God spoke to me 3 times during my meeting of him. And I want to talk a little bit about that, the voice of God.
Yeah.
The Holy Spirit, he began to minister to me far before this ever happened. It was just a feeling that I had around the guy. And it was an intuition that let me know that there's something about this guy that's not right. And a lot of times God speaks to us, and we want to hear God in the fire and in the earthquake. We want to hear God in a voice that comes from heaven, in a loud voice. But sometimes it's just a subtle impression that God gives us that we have to learn to listen to. And so it is that we get in the car. I'm driving down the parkway, and he tells me exactly what happens and why it happened. And basically, from that point on, I just took the standpoint of saying, my name is Emmett. I'm not in it, bro. I don't want to know anything else about what you're talking about. Matter of fact, when we dropped everybody off, I was never here this night. But one thing about God is that life is not that simple. We can't just make bad decisions and think that they just go away by themselves.
Right.
And so I had some I had some things that I could have done. I could have definitely turned him in that night. But at 18 years old, I was quote unquote keeping it real.
Yeah.
But what I understand is that the reality of the Christian is not necessarily the reality of the world. Mm-hmm. And so
hey, John, can I just ask you real quick? Because you brought up a good point. Is there a misconception among our young Black men, especially, or young people in general? The misconception of keeping it real. I think you don't really understand what real really is until you're much older. Can you speak a little bit about that? What that type of culture is for those that may not know what that means? What do you think the misconception of that is?
Keeping it real is basically not telling the truth if you feel as if it might cause you some type of harm or some type of retribution because of what you say. Mm-hmm. But I found that in life is that the same people who are talking the most about keeping it real, if they look at their personal lives, they're not real themselves.
Wow.
I mean, reality is that when you are involved in a situation, the only way that you can be exonerated out of a situation you're involved in is you got to declare your innocence. If declaring your innocence is implicating someone else, then, the way the street looks at it is like, okay, you got to live by the code. But I'm here to let everybody know is that the judges don't have the code. The code, the code of the state you're living in, the judge don't have that code, and he don't live by that code. So this is your imaginary code that you're living by in your neighborhood amongst people who don't love you or know you or care anything about you.
Right.
And the penalty that you pay for that is a penalty that they soon forget about you and forget about the price you had to pay.
Wow.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Let me jump in on you right quick, because you know how I set this thing up when I asked you the question. I set it up for you to talk about the injustice, but you, in answering the question, put the whole full responsibility on yourself. And I think it's important, no matter how much we want to point to the man or the system or anything like that, we do play a role. And so we can't necessarily control the system. We can't necessarily dictate what the system is and that we live under, but we can control ourselves and our own decisions. I appreciate the fact that you was like, you didn't even take the bait of my social injustice. You didn't even take it. You was just like, look, this what happened to me. These are the things I could have done differently in the situation, as opposed to this is what society had them do in my arrest and all that, and put it all on the man, and I shouldn't have been locked up for so long and all of that. But you said, listen, I made a decision in 1 minute that, man, if I would have done some different things with that minute, boy, this would be a whole nother podcast.
Well, you know, this is another thing that people have to realize is that, okay, inside of the purpose, your predestined, purpose, there is that part of you that is knowledgeable. At least in my life, it was knowledgeable to me that God wanted to use me from an early age. So it's not like I was just totally void of knowing that God wanted to use me in some manner. I knew that God wanted to do something in my life, and I was never comfortable. Even with the rap music, it was all about trying to get quick money. It was about, you know, the women, the fame, or what have you. But there was this part of me that was never really comfortable because I knew that God had another purpose and plan for my life.
Right.
And so a lot of people struggle with that, and they make bad decisions based on, you know, the love of money, or you know, wanting to be known or wanting to have the fame.
Right.
And so my whole rap career was about making money and not spending a whole lot of time in life trying to, you know, toil to be wealthy. I wanted to make some rap songs and make this money and, you know, invest maybe later on, but I wanted the quick route. But we all know that there is a way that seemeth right, you know, and the end thereof is the ways of death. And so that particular night, I spoke to everybody in the car. I was like, basically, I wasn't here, man. I don't know nothing about this. You know, you go your way, I go mine. There is no more group. Hey, I don't know nothing about what happened. But God taught me this. Everything in life, every decision you make in life has a price tag connected to it. And just like you wouldn't go into a restaurant and not have money to pay for your food, you can't make decisions in life and not think that there's a price tag connected to every decision that you make. And in making this decision, it was not long before I was a student at Oakwood College at the time. And I was basically at my job. I worked at Olive Garden. And I was there doing my, you know, my job when the police officers came in.
Wow.
They had a capital murder warrant for my arrest. Unfortunately, the guy that was, you know, approached, he was shot. And 3 days later, he died.
Mm.
And so now I'm in a situation where I'm facing the highest crime of the land. And I've never laid eyes on the guy who got shot. You know, I've never seen him physically with my eyes.
Mm.
But because I was the driver of the car and because I didn't want to cooperate, which they gave me the opportunity to do so. They basically wanted me to say that I saw the person who shot the man commit the crime. I did not see him shoot the man because I was not in the vicinity of where he shot at.
And you were still telling the truth, right? But then when he wanted you to lie and say that you saw it.
Yeah, so they offered me the opportunity, and it was kind of part of my family was like, tell those folk whatever they need to hear because they want me to see me again.
That's real, right?
But I thank God for my father, who's no longer with us. But my dad was a devout Christian, and my father said, "Son," he said, "if you didn't know that was going to happen," he said, "you can't testify to that end." And I never forget, my mom was she was so worried at the time because, of course, life without or the electric chair were the only two options in 1992 for a capital offense. And Alabama was so notorious for giving the death penalty that they named the electric chair Yellow Mama. They gave it a name. Wow. And so I found myself in a situation where, you know, just the thought of losing my life was something I had to deal with for at least 2 years. It took me 2 years to go to trial.
Wow.
And so I sat up under that charge. But this is where I want to kind of, if I can, I want to shift and I want to give God the glory.
Yeah.
For 2 years, I'm in lockup. And while in lockup, I tell God, I say, God, if you're real, then prove it to me. If you prove it to me, then I live for you. If you don't prove it to me, then I'm going to plot my own way of escape. These are my words. Whether it was justifiable to talk to God like that or not, I don't know. But this is what I said.
Right.
And that particular night, I went to sleep and I felt something like a hand on my chest. And I literally heard the voice of God. I know that's a lot of people don't believe that God speaks audibly. They feel that God does not have a voice like that.
Right.
But I know that God speaks. God did not tell me to save the world. He did not call me to preach. He didn't call me an evangelist and all the wonderful things that perhaps people would think he would have said in a moment like that. But what he said was take the pictures off the wall. Mm. And what he meant by that was on the cell, the lockup cell I was in, I had pictures. And those pictures were pictures of all the women that I wanted to be with and all the women I unfortunately had been with. Because at 19 years old, I wanted to remember women. My mind was not on God. My mind was on women and money and fame. And so I looked at the wall and I asked God why. And his words to me were these: because I need your undivided attention. Mm. And then I knew then that in order for me to find a way of escape out of the situation I was in, it was going to take God. I was in too deep. I was in a situation that was greater than me. I was in a situation that I could find no way out. And what God did was he gave me a key. He gave me a key that night. And he said, what it's going to take for you to find the answer to the dilemma of your life is you're going to have to give me your undivided attention. Wow. It's not going to be some of your time. You're going to have to focus solely on me.
Right.
And as I began to do that, God began to minister to me in dreams and visions. And I share this a lot when I travel and when I do motivational speaking or when I'm invited to churches, etc. Because a lot of people think that visions and dreams are no longer a method in which God used. Mm-hmm. And not to single out any faith, but I grew up in the Seventh-day Adventist faith. And so much emphasis was put on Ellen G. White and the visions and dreams that she had and a spirit of prophecy. And I have nothing against the spirit of prophecy. Matter of fact, I believe that ye may all prophesy. But what I challenge people to understand is that the spirit of prophecy is not just a book. The literal spirit of prophecy is something that every born again believer can tap into. God wants to give us information that's relevant to our personal life. And in 2020, there's some things that you need to know about, like COVID and other things, that God wants you to seek his face so he can give you personalized information about what you need to do in these last days. And so God gave me personalized information about what I was going to have to do in my situation. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong, knowing about prophecies and things like that involved other individuals would have been nice, but it was not what I needed at that time. I needed God to speak to me concerning what I was going through. And so I began a quest of seeking God's face like never before. And
that was
I woke up.
That was at the 2-year mark that before you got the trial.
It was about, I would say about a year and I would say about a year and 5 months, somewhere in there. Mm-hmm. It wasn't quite 2 years, but it was close to.
Can you briefly, real quick, just talk about the system in terms of, is there a particular reason why it took so long for that to occur, for the trial to occur? I'm sure as a young African-American male sitting there waiting 2 years to tell your truth had to be difficult.
Well, it started with the legal team that I had. $15,000 just to take my case, almost $40,000, in total. And I didn't even I could count the number of visits I got on one hand.
Wow.
we were totally, we had no knowledge of the law. And so we didn't know how the system of the law worked. All my parents could do was take their retirement money and try to save their son. But the reason it took so long is because the strategy that the lawyer said he had was that he wanted the other, people involved in the case to go to trial first. He felt as if it was election time, and he felt that there was just a lot of emphasis being put on crime. This was in the 90s. They had the gangs were rampant at that time. You had Colors, the movie Colors, and NWA. And so they wanted to make this into a gang affiliated situation, which they did somewhat. And I've never been gang affiliated and never had a desire to be in a gang. But that's what would have benefited the judges, during that time, because it was election time and they were all running hard against crime. And every time that we would come up and I would look like I might have a court date, he would have it put back. And he would say that it was in my best interest for it to be that way. And so it is. I finally get an opportunity to stand trial. And during jury selection, they just purposely, they strike all of the black jurors. They give me one. I had one black juror on my jury. No peers. Everyone in my case was basically older, white males and females. There was definitely a strategy that the defense had. And what I found myself doing was, asking my lawyer, why was it like that? And he would just give me the advice that don't worry about it. It's actually better for you. And, he was doing what a lot of lawyers do. I won't say all lawyers. I do have some friends who are lawyers, but he was doing what most lawyers do. And he was trying to basically give me that assurance, that false hope that everything would be okay.
Yeah. Hey, Doc. So just in lieu of time, man, I don't know how you could take all these years and like squeeze them into one little short conversation, but just understanding that the situation with you being locked up was one where you didn't do the crime. The situation was you took 2 years. You didn't necessarily get the representation you needed, and so now you're in there, man. And just tell me, like, as a prisoner, dude, how is it that you kept the faith in? Because I'm gonna tell you the truth. When I got in trouble when I was that age, I thought to myself, because Malcolm X had come out, I thought to myself, seriously, look, if I had to go to prison, dude, I'm gonna be Muslim. Because I felt like maybe if I was Muslim in prison, that'd be how I could, survive. I mean, I never went to prison, but the reality is I had those thoughts as a person at the age that you were when that happened to you. So as a Christian, making your commitment to God a year in, how did you continue to be a Christian, and how did that play out during your prison sentence?
It played out because of a dream, just to be honest with you. While I was locked up, God gave me this dream. And in this dream, I was in an all-white church that had no windows and no doors. There was no way out of it. And as I began to search for a way out, I found something that looked like a fireplace, a perfectly cut square in the side of a wall. I got on my knees and began to crawl in this tunnel. And when I looked back, it grew for miles in both directions. I could choose to go to my left or to my right, but something on the inside of me said, if you get off this path, you're going to be lost forever. And so I continued to go forward. And as I went forward, I could hear this music playing. And there was a light. It was so far away, but the closer I got to the light, the harder it was for me to crawl. Well, when I came out of the dream, I knew it was from God, but I didn't know what it meant. And I was talking to one of my friends from the college I attended, and I told her the dream, and she told me that her mother had the gift of interpretations of dreams. I'd heard of it because I grew up in the church, but as far as me believing at that time that God was actually going to give me the interpretation through someone else, I didn't necessarily put my faith in that area. And so we had a discussion, and we joked and we talked about the fact that, I don't believe in psychics. I remember that being our conversation.
Yeah.
And she said, my mother's not a psychic. My mother is a Christian. She said, my mother, that's how God deals with my mother. And so she put her mom on the phone, and her mom began to talk to me, and I gave her the dream as it was given to me, and she began to weep on the phone. And what she said was, she said, the white represents the righteousness of God. She said, I challenge you to read the book of Revelation. You'll find that white is representative of the righteousness of God. She said, and the tunnel represents the time that you will get. And unfortunately, you're going to get a lot of time. She said, the music that you heard means you're going to do something musically while you're in prison. And she said that the light that you saw at the end of the tunnel represented the fact that your ending is going to be brighter than its beginning. Well, I didn't want to receive the interpretation of the dream, and I didn't. Matter of fact, I was like, the devil is a lie. I'm not doing no time. You know what I'm saying? I'm going home.
Yeah.
But I asked 2 other ministers of 2 different faiths, and that's why I tell people, be careful about limiting God to your faith, because I received interpretations from a person that was a Baptist, a person that was a Seventh-day Adventist, and a person that was holiness. And they were the same interpretation of the same dream.
Wow.
And so I knew then that God was giving me confirmation, and unfortunately I was going to do some time. So to answer your question, I didn't go into prison not knowing that God was not with me. I knew that God was with me, but I still didn't want to go.
Right.
Who wants to do, and they gave me a life sentence, by the way, but let me give you what the judge said when he sentenced me. I think this is very important.
Yeah.
What the judge said was this. He said, Mr. Moore, because your actions, however, indirectly cause a life to be taken in the state of Alabama, I hereby sentence you to life in the state penitentiary. He said, and Mr. Moore, you can take this life and use it. But what I'm going to tell you next is not him talking. This is what God said through him. He said, and you can take this life and throw it away. So the part that the judge said, you can take this life and use it, or you can take this life and throw it away, that was God speaking through the judge to me.
Wow.
And it was like his face literally came before me when he spoke those words. And I was like, I was in this epiphany. I saw my mother. She had buried her face in my father's armpit. She was crying. I seen all 3 of my girlfriends in the courtroom. I was pledging a Mega Psi Phi. I saw my entire line in the courtroom because I had obtained some popularity. And see, that's the thing. What God needed me to do is understand that he wanted me to be popular, but not for the world. See, I wanted the popularity for the world. And he knew that I was a leader in my own right. And he wanted to use my leadership to draw people to Christ.
Right.
I wanted to use my abilities or my, talents and giftings or whatever to draw people to me. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be known. And so in his process of stripping me from all of that, I entered into prison, and it was the most humbling experience, of course, anything I've ever experienced, because it was modern day slavery. I went in, they had rifles. Of course, I walked in the back gate, and they told me to walk into this room, and I had to strip naked in front of a line of men, just like a slave. And every derogatory name, every derogatory word was used to describe all of us that were on that bus that took us to the prison. And after that, I was sprayed down with bug repellent. They used the inmate to spray down all of the other guys that came in. That was part of a psychological warfare. They used that to kind of, I guess, put people in a position of knowing that they're hopeless. After that, I was told to take a shower, and I was told to go to the barbershop, and they cut my hair off. They wouldn't let me grow any hair on my face. I couldn't have any sideburns, no mustache. And I believe that it was an agenda, even with that. After that, I was given 3 pairs of clothes, 3 pairs of boxer shorts, 3 shirts, 3 pairs of pants. But there's 7 days in a week. But I was given 3 pairs of everything, some used boots. and I was told where I would be spending years of my life.
Mm.
And I never forget, I walked in the corridor. For whatever reason, the lights had went out, and it was dark in the hallway. And I walked to the cell block that I was assigned to, and I sat on the bed that they assigned me to. And I just was in amazement, because it really just dawned on me what was going on. And you know, it takes time for your mind and your body to really to sink in that, you know, I'm here now. And I thank God for using people. There was a man, I don't know who he is to this day. He was an old timer, and he saw me. He said, "Look, man," he said, "can I talk to you for a minute?" And I, with hesitation, I was like, "No, man, I'm good, man." You know, because I'm like, I don't want to talk to nobody. You know, I don't want to be in no predicament where I get more time or I get in any fights, because I want to, if possible, keep a clean record so I can get out. Mm-hmm. And he assured me that he wasn't about any foolishness. He said, "Man, I see you over here." He said, "I see that you're young." And it was amazing. This man told me things about myself that nobody could have known. He told me that I had been to college. He told me some other things, but one of the things that stood out, he said, "That girlfriend you got, she gonna leave you." He said, "So you can stop worrying about the ladies." He said, "You need to either be with the Christians or you need to be in the law library." And he began to point out all the different segments of prison. He showed me where the, you know, where the IGDs were, where the Bloods and the Crips were. He showed me where the Masons were. He showed me where everybody was at. And he told me, if you're going to survive, there's two places you need to go. He said, you're going to the chapel or either you're going to the law library. And so I began my prison sentence, and I began to teach people how to read, because the illiteracy rate was so high that people would actually ask me to read their letters, because they didn't know what their families were saying. They didn't know what their little girl was saying or what their wife was saying on the letter.
Hey, Doc, so how did that come about? Like initially, like how did people know that you could read and that you were willing to read for them? Like how did that play out the initial time, like the first time?
Yeah.
Well, it happened because of conversation. Definitely. In prison, most people can, they should have a degree in psychology. Every person who's done time should just automatically walk out of prison with a psychology degree, because they can discern the difference between somebody who only has street application versus somebody who, you know, responds to situations differently. They could tell by maybe see me reading most of the time. You know, even when I wasn't reading the Bible, I would be reading, which, you know, a lot of people, if they read anything, it would be those type of books. Right. It wasn't, you know, material that could help them. The guys that go to the library, most of them can read, obviously. So when they would see me go to the law library and stuff like that, you know, they kind of knew that I could at least read.
Now, when that was surprising, Doc, when you said, you know, read the Bible or go to the law library. I didn't know that the law library was that significant.
Right.
So are you saying that a lot of people spent some time in the law library reading in prison?
Not as many as need to. There are people that have been in prison for 20 years. I've never been to the law library, but the ones who really want to go home, it's the least that they can do is see if they can find, you know, that law that will set them free.
Mm.
And
wow,
I immediately, you know, I went in. Of course, I wanted to find a way out, and I didn't want that dream to come to pass.
Right.
Because in the dream, I was getting a lot of time. I was going to do a lot of time. So as I began to teach men how to read, the warden found out about it, and you know, the officers report to the warden when they see things that could be a potential problem. And so a lot of people would meet on the yard. Most of them were just guys that were just talking about, you know, whatever, but they knew that a lot of guys knew me for whatever reason. And this particular warden didn't know why they knew me. So he called me into his office, and he basically gave me that talk that I don't know what you're doing in my prison, but if you're doing anything illegal, I want to let you know that I will ship you and I will hide you in the system. You will go from prison to prison. It will only get worse for you. And so I told him that I'm not doing anything illegal. That basically I'm just teaching guys how to read. And that's why you see me on the yard at certain times in a circle with certain guys. And so from there, he took a liking to me. And he asked me if I wanted a job to be a runner in the prison. What a runner is the person that I'm like a mail clerk. So I became like the mail clerk. I could leave the prison and literally go to the post office with an officer. I could put the flag up in the beginning of each day, which allowed me to walk out of the prison. So out of 1,100 inmates, I was the only one that could literally leave the prison. Another warden came, and under his tenure, he took a liking to me to the point where he started allowing me to go to high schools to speak and to give my testimony and to share with people. I did learn how to play, and this is how I learned how to play the keyboard. In prison, the only place that had air conditioning was the chapel. And
hey Doc, before you finish this story, let me clarify that what John has been going through is telling us kind of step by step, and some examples out of the thousands that he has is how in a situation that is bleak, he still saw God moving. Like I'm seeing Joseph all up in your story. And so even as you're going into this next, because you told us about one warden, then you told us about another warden.
Yeah.
To tell us something else. I just want everybody to understand what ride we on. And so we on the ride that looked like Joseph ride, that even in slavery, even in the horrible situation.
Right.
Look at this. Look at what God is still doing. Look, God didn't like leave me at the door and say he'll see me in 18 years, but he came in here with me. And so I just want to let the people know what ride they on, bro. You can keep on talking.
Yeah, God was definitely there. You know, as I began to develop my relationship with God, he would deal with me. He would give me words of wisdom, words of knowledge. He would show me things to come. That's what the Holy Spirit does. And so many things that happened in that prison, he would give me the heads up. And there was even a time when the warden took me out of prison to his house. I literally ate dinner at the warden's house, and I had on prison whites. You see what I'm saying? And so he started taking me to high schools to speak.
Yeah.
And then I even got a chance to play at his church because one of his lead. Yeah.
Now, when you went in, you didn't know how to play music, correct?
No, this is how I learned how to play.
Yeah.
I went into the chapel to get out of the heat. The chapel was not the place to go when I first came to prison. Matter of fact, I was advised never going to chapel because it's where they gambled, where they met up, gang members met up to decide, what devilment they were going to do. And so, homosexuality, just a lot of stuff going on where people can set times and dates in the chapel and not be in the general population. So I didn't want any parts of that.
Right.
But it was so hot this particular summer that a horse died. I was on the chain gang. And before I got the job as a runner, I literally had chains around my ankles. I would have to have a sling blade cutting grass. I would have a man on a horse with a shotgun over me.
That sounds real familiar, Doc. That sounds real familiar.
Yeah, it was modern day slavery. And I came in, it was so hot, and I wanted to go to the chapel, and there was a guy in there, and his name is Dion, and we're good friends to this day. And Dion had a gospel group, and they would have to schedule time where they could utilize the chapel because we have one chapel for all different beliefs and faiths. You see what I'm saying? So they had to schedule time, and he said, well, I can't let you in here because your name is not on the list. He said, however, if you agree to break down the equipment, then I can let you stay. And the reason the equipment had to be broken down is because everything can be used as a weapon. So the cords, the microphones, and all this stuff had to be, put away. And so when I met him, I would just listen to the music. And one of the members of his group left, and he asked me, would I be willing to stand in for a member of his group? And I told him, I'm not a singer. I don't sing. So he was like, well, you got nothing but time. Why not try? And so after trying, and we started a group called Just Us. And we would sing, in the prison, which led to us singing for the graduations of the substance abuse program and the GED program, which led to us traveling and singing throughout the prison system. So God began to open doors right where I was at. But this is how I learned to play. He had a vision that he was playing in a service, and he looked to the wall and he saw a hole appear in the wall.
Wow.
And in this hole, he could see flames of fire. Wow. And he was following these individual flames of fire, and it led him to another prison. And when he got to that prison, he looked back through the hole and he could see me in the chapel playing the keyboard. So he came back to me and he told me the vision. And I basically told him, I said, look, man, it may have been me in the dream or vision, but it didn't have to mean that I'm going to be the one playing, because I can't play anything. I don't play any instruments.
Right.
He said, well, God gave me a word. He said, God told me to pray for you. And through the gift of impartation, I'm going to lay hands on you. And the gift that I have to play, that you will have that gift. And I had my reserves, because when you allow doctrines and when you allow traditions and when you allow denominational limitations to describe God, you're going to miss out on a lot of other things that God have that you think he don't have because you and yours don't possess. And so through the laying on of hands, the gift of impartation is how I received my ability to play. I was in a service in the prison service, and there was a woman there. Her name was Mother Grayson. And Mother Grayson, she said that God had given her a word that someone who was in the service was going to be the next musician. And she asked, did anyone receive that word? And I didn't say anything. I just sat there silently. She began to encourage the population again. And then she asked the question again, and I didn't say anything again. But the third time she pointed at me and she said, you. She said, didn't God give you a word that you're going to be the next musician in the chapel service? And I told her, I said, a man gave me the word. I said, God didn't give me the word. She said, no. She said, it was God. God used people. And she said, as an act of your faith, I want you to get up right now and come to the keyboard. And she said, I want you to play. And so I used my 2 pointing fingers. And I never forget, I went to the keyboard and they were singing, What a Mighty God We Serve. And it didn't even sound like the song, honestly. And so after the service, the benediction, I raised my hand, and she asked me if I had anything to say to the congregation. And I apologized. I told everybody I'm sorry. I didn't mean to mess the service up. I can't play. And she stopped me. She said, never say you can't play. She said, God said that every time you play, you're going to get better. In 3 months, I could play their entire repertoire. And in about 6 months, I started writing my own songs.
Hey, man, my goodness, dude. So listen, and I know there were so many more miracles that happened in there, man, but we're going to have to transition, Doc. We can talk.
We can ask him. We can ask. I wanted to ask him, G. Can we ask him how the Lord got him out? Is that where you were heading, G?
No, well, I was going to talk about afterwards even, but
yeah.
Okay. So what was the process of you getting out, Doc? Because I mean, you said there were 2 options. You told us a story. You said either it was death or you said it was life without parole. Right. And so obviously you got out.
You out, right?
Let me give God the glory. Basically, when I went to trial, they took my one case, split it up into 2 separate cases, basically. And my mother, she told me basically to not fight it because that would keep me from getting life without an electric chair. Under the new terms in which I was tried, the maximum I could probably get was a life sentence, which is what I got. Natural life, not life without, okay? But this is how I got out, and this is where God get the glory. I was a runner, so that means I was in the front of the institution. I was the only one who could, they had what they call a front lobby of the prison.
Right.
And it's right where the warden's office is, and that's where I worked at every day. And so I was cleaning the floor, and a man walks in. I'm getting ahead of myself. I got to give you this.
Yeah.
I got to give you this. Yeah. There's a guy, he's a good friend of mine. His name is Demetrius Huckabee. we called him Prophet in prison. That was his prison name. We called him Prophet because God would give him revelations about people, and he would share those revelations as the Lord allowed. Well, God gave him a revelation about the warden, that the warden will become the commissioner. And he came to me and said, John, I had a vision that the warden was going to become the commissioner, but I need you to take this letter to the warden because it's the only way that I can give him the revelation that God gave me. Well, what he didn't know, and what I told him later on, was the warden forbade me to give him letters that he didn't request. I couldn't just go to an inmate and get a letter and give it to him. And so I prayed and I fasted, and God told me to take the letter to the warden.
Wow.
So I took the letter to the warden, I gave it to him, and he was tapping on, he had a pen, he was tapping on his desk, and he looked at me and he said, do you not know the rules and regulations? You've been working for me long enough to know that this is an infraction of institutional rules. And I told him, he said, what in the world would make you violate institutional rules to give me this letter? And what my words that I spoke to him, I said, the integrity of the man that gave me the letter.
Hey.
And when I said that to him, he looked at me, he kind of frowned a little bit and told me to get out of his office. And I ran up out of there. And so a few days passed and he came back to me. He said, do you think I'm going to be the commissioner? I said, warden, if prophet said you're going to be the commissioner, I had to say you're going to be the commissioner. And a few months after that, he did become the commissioner.
Wow.
And
I know there's more to the story, but I just want to jump in and say, dude, I know I said Joseph, but now you done flipped this thing. Dude, that was the story of Esther, right? I'm looking at him clapping the pen. I'm like, man, that's Esther. I mean, dude, you were not supposed to do that. And you fasted and prayed just like she told the folks to do before she went in before the king died. Goodness, man.
Yeah.
I love the fact, man, that the Bible comes alive in our stories.
Right.
If we would just go back and rehearse them, we will see what God is doing, dude. So what's the conclusion of the matter, man? What's the conclusion of the matter? He's the commissioner now. What happened?
Okay, as a commissioner, he was able to lower my custody level, which allowed me to go to work release. And after lowering my custody level, he basically put me in a position where I could be eligible for parole again, which I had been turned down sometimes, but due to my custody level being lowered, they gave me an early parole consideration. And this is where God get the glory. I'm gonna give you the end of it. As I'm cleaning up in this front lobby, a man walks in. This man looks at me and he says, Johnathan. And I look at him and I say, Dwayne. Dwayne is a guy that grew up in my hometown. And, you know, him and his brother, they was pretty rough, you know, back in the day. You know, they were about that street life. But he had become this lawyer, and not just a lawyer, but he become the head of a law firm, Dwayne L. Brown and Associates, that was located at that time in Montgomery, Alabama. And he was the youngest African-American to own his own law firm in Montgomery. And when he came in, he asked me if I had my transcripts. And I told him no. He said, well, tell your family to send me your transcripts. And unfortunately, my mother had passed, you know, while I was inside. So I got word to my father, and they sent my transcripts. And it looked like all hope was gone. And about a year and a half, 2 years passed, and I didn't hear from Dwayne. So now I'm like, man, you know, this was like, you know, false hope, but it wasn't. Because God had told me earlier that he would deliver me in a way that I think if not. So those were words that he spoke to me. All my words are written down. I would always write down whatever God spoke to me. I kept a journal. And so when my book comes out, you'll see things, you know, we'll talk more about that then. But anyways, God, what he did was they called me up for early parole. And Dwayne, he presented, he was the lawyer that represented me.
Wow.
But my family didn't know that he was going to do that. And I didn't know that he knew when my actual parole date was. I had given up all hope. And so he heard my name And he said, I'll be representing Johnathan Moore. And so for what my sister said, because you don't stand before your accusers in Alabama. When you come up for parole, you never go to the parole board. Mm-hmm. And so my sister said that he challenged the parole board. And what he said was this: if you can find another inmate in the state of Alabama who's been locked up for 18 years and has never had a disciplinary action against him, I will simply grab my briefcase, turn around, and walk away. Mm. And as they begin to look through my institutional history, I had no write-ups, which is impossible. There's no way I personally could have had no write-ups. It takes God for that to happen. They're going to write you up just because you got hair on your face is a write-up. Just because you went to checkout late, that's a write-up. So I never had a write-up. Never had a disciplinary that held up against me. Mm. And basically, they sent me to a program called Life Tech. And from when I graduated Life Tech, I was released.
Wow. Yo, that's incredible, man. Incredible.
Incredible. And listen, I spent a couple of weekends with John, man. And there's so many things, man, where you see the Lord working even inside a horrible situation. But I just want to, because as we're almost kind of coming to a close as far as time, you've been out for a certain period of time, and there the transition is something. I mean, if we could really squeeze it in, because I really want to know like how you transitioned out.
And what are you doing now, man? Where are you now?
As a church, to make it better for people that were in your situation,
right?
As prison ministries, as transitional ministries, and how you thriving and doing God's work right now.
Okay. Through the help of the warden of the institution who had become the commissioner, I was granted an opportunity to go back into the prison system and to the same prison I was in and minister to the men. On this side, I no longer do that because God answered my other prayer. He shut that prison down. Wow. I never prayed that God would better the prison. I prayed that not one stone would be left upon another. So I'm waiting for them to tear it down. It's shut down, but I'm waiting for it to come down.
Yeah.
And but here in Atlanta, I do a lot of motivational speaking. I call it such because there's ways to magnify God in situations in which we're prohibited. Unfortunately, we live in a time where everybody knows that they need God, but nobody wants you to be able to pray to God or say God in certain, in certain circles. So when I go to high schools, I can't really just preach, but I can give my testimony. And so that's what I do. Other than that, I have completed a book I've written called More Than Life. And it's in the process of being published at this time. And actually being proofread to be published, but
that's awesome.
It's the entire story of my life. I didn't write it for finance. I didn't write it. I wrote it because when I was in, I kept a journal. And God told me that the information in it was going to be pertinent to the end times. Wow. God showed me so many things that are going on now. He showed me this stuff, some of this stuff 15 years ago. I saw it. You see what I'm saying? So the reason why I'm at peace now during the pandemic is because of what I saw. And I challenge people during this time, spend time with God like never before. I know you're hearing a lot of stuff. Christ is soon to return. Christ is soon to return. You don't have the time that you think you have. I promise you, you don't have the time that you think you have. And what God was telling me was that he allowed me to go in and allowed me to go through what I went through, because I'm gonna have to encourage a lot of people through things that are just as hard or not even harder. And I know the church doesn't really want to hear that.
That's real though.
God, but it's going to get harder. And but God got some people that have been tucked away, some people that the world have forgotten about. He got some ex-crackheads. He got some people that did time. He got ex-prostitutes. He got people that you would never believe that he would use that are going to be able to withstand the hardest situation. They're going to have to encourage the church.
That's it.
They're going to have to literally encourage the church not to give up, because if I can make it through this, you can make it through this. You know what I'm saying?
Good.
So it's an exciting time for me. I want to be used by God. And when I say an exciting time, you say, well, how's it exciting? Well, you got COVID. I want to be used to heal.
Yeah.
I remember at one time the church was excited about the power of God. Where did the excitement go?
Yeah.
This is the harvest is white. It's the best time to witness right now.
It's the best time.
And so I'm excited about what God is doing, because I got a word from him, not from a pastor, not from somebody else.
Right.
I have a word that God gave me from him.
Right.
And it's that word, because if he can deliver me from prison, he can deliver me from anything.
That's it. That's it. Yo, John, man, we want to say thank you so much, bro, for doing this for us. You know, we typically end by saying, where can people find you? Before I want to do that, man, can you just take, 30 to 60 seconds and just speak to some young person that can be listening, some parent that's struggling with a teen, or a young person that may be in the position that you're in? What's your encouragement, man, for the person who is in a situation where they're trying to keep it real and they're not as focused? What can you give them, man, for today, for those who are listening?
There's never a situation that God doesn't have a way out of. The key to every situation in life that challenges you is going to the one that created all things. You have to find time to seek the source of all knowledge and wisdom and understanding. People mean well, but God has the literal way of escape out of your circumstance, whatever that may be. And you have to seek his face. I mean, be real with God. Whatever you feel. Remember I told God, if you don't deliver me, I'm going to find a way of escape. Well, he heard me because I was real. He heard me because I said exactly what I felt. The Bible says, come, let us reason together, saith the Lord. So God wants to have an honest conversation with you about suicide, about drug addiction, about, sexual addictions. He wants to have an honest conversation with you. And if you have that conversation with God, and if you humble yourself under the mighty hand of God, God will give you a way of escape.
Yo, man.
Amen.
Man. Thank you, Doc, so much. Tell the people how we can find you on social media. How can somebody who wants to book you for a next event, whether right now it's got to be by Zoom or by StreamYard, but how can people reach out to you? How can we stay in contact with you?
You can find me at my website under Moore, Moore. That's my last name, Johnathan Moore. Morethan.life. MOORETHAN.life. You can also find me on Instagram under God's the number 4 evermore. So it's GODS 4 the number 4 evermore. And you can find me on Facebook under God's Forevermore, but more is spelled MOORE. So it's GODS the number 4 MOORE on Facebook.
Sounds great, man. Sounds great. G, man, this was a good one today, man.
Yeah,
all of them were great, but man, this is just taking it higher, man.
Right. And we can interview John 3 times and get different scenarios and stories each time. But I appreciate the way you choose the ones you used with us today. I appreciate the words that you've given of hope, of the story of Joseph that's all in your life, the story of Esther that's all in your life, and so me speaking on behalf of everybody that will listen, that will do, man, thank you. Thank you. God has blessed you, but God bless you.
Yeah, man.
God bless you all.
Thank you so much, man. We look forward to hearing from you real soon, man. Take care, bro.
Will do. Thank you.
Yo, G, today was great. Today was dope, man. For all of our listeners, all of our viewers, thank you so much for always catching us. G, like I said before, man, it seems like we keep going higher and higher. Everybody we talk to, man. I don't know, how'd you feel about today? Yeah,
man, I loved it, man. I listen. It's funny when you start thinking about who to interview, man.
Yeah.
We all. It's not just us. It's not me. Yeah. It's not you. We all know extraordinary people.
Yeah.
Extraordinary people are ordinary people.
Right.
And we all have people in our lives if we take time to find out their story.
For sure, man.
We all have people in our lives that done something or been through something that can help us, dude, if we just talk to them.
Right, man.
Listen to them. And we give them a platform. So I'm just grateful to be able to just call just my regular old friends who got some great stories, man.
Sure.
We all can learn from and benefit.
There's some great men that come out of Pine Forge out here, man. I don't know, man. Hey, listen, you've been listening to the Academy Podcast. For those who are viewing us on Facebook and YouTube, I want to give a special shout out. Me and G want to say thank you to all of our subscribers, those who have liked us on Facebook, those who subscribed to our YouTube. If you have not subscribed to our YouTube and you want to see us, man, come check us out on our YouTube page, The Academy with Austin and G. Thank you for all those who listen to our podcast through all of the major platforms, including Spotify and iTunes. We look forward to seeing you every single Monday for a brand new episode of the Academy Podcast. We will see and you will hear from us later. Everybody take care.
All right.
You've been listening to the Academy Podcast with Austin and G. Hit the subscribe button and come again. You can find us on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, and of course, Facebook. Oh yeah. And if you know someone who could use the information you just gained, take a minute to share. Much love from the AP.